strategies for your home, presented by Ryan Wood. So if you're unfamiliar with Trees Matter, we are a local nonprofit with a mission to foster and inspire and increase more balanced tree canopy in the Valley of the Sun. And we have three main programs that we do this with: our Shade Tree program with SRP and City of Mesa, where we distribute trees across the valley. Our planting programs, which is what I run personally, and we plant trees at schools, parks, neighborhoods. And then our food forest program, which we have been kind of re-engaging and hoping to do more events with that. You might have seen, if you follow us on social media, that we just had a bunch of mesquite harvesting and milling events. Um, and so those are our main three programs. And we started doing lunch and learns because we notice, in the summer it gets really hot. We don't have as many in-person events to engage volunteers and engage the community. So that was a big reason, was to kind of fill this gap in the summer when there's not as much happening. And then we also wanted to provide more educational opportunities that are free and accessible to people. So we've covered a few different topics and still have two more after um, after the this one. So we'll be talking about in the next one native plants, and that will be a former ASU professor that will be giving that lunch and learn. And then we also are wanting to build up our tree team, which is our dedicated volunteers that help us at all of our events and also kind of receive additional educational opportunities. And also we have social events. Um, and our tree team, it's just our recurring volunteers. So if you attend five events, then you are a member of our tree team, and we have specific shirts, and then we have hats that you get for free, and then, like I said, additional trainings, and then leadership opportunities, um, and building community. We have our lots of fun social events. Um, I believe these have all passed, but we do have some more um, dates coming soon with some more things coming up. So stay tuned. We'll send out messages about that later. And for today's speaker, we are going to be hearing from Ryan Wood. Ryan is a water conservation specialist with the City of Tempe and has over 16 years of experience educating residents on water conservation and efficiency practices. Ryan has earned certifications in water harvesting, landscaping, irrigation, sustainable landscape maintenance, and most recently has become a certified arborist. Ryan is passionate about his work and loves to share his knowledge with others. Also, if you have ever joined one of our SRP webinars, you are probably familiar with Ryan because he also is our presenter for those as well. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you guys again for being here.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, Ali. I appreciate that. And thank you everyone for taking your time this afternoon to do a little lunch and learn with us. I really appreciate you. This is a topic that I'm just very passionate about. It brings me back to my roots, and same with Trees Matter. Back in 2008 is when I completed my permaculture design course, and rainwater harvesting was a big part of it. And I just latched onto it. It's just something that I felt that we should all be doing here in the valley because, well, as people say, it doesn't rain here. Well, that is the reason why we should be harvesting our rainwater, because when it does rain, we should be thinking about collecting it. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And I hate to disappoint, but everything I'm going to share with you is nothing new. These are ancient practices, for just to be able to survive as human rights, we have to have water. And where's that water coming from? And so we're going to be able to collect that. And so, but hopefully there's some tips and tricks on this that you can take to home. But it's understanding our water and where does our water come from and getting back to that water cycle. And so, it rains and the snow, that precipitation, and as it flows down from the mountains to the creeks to the rivers, there's just a finite amount of water that we can use as a resource. And so, as you can see on this world's water, for the whole world, on it's rather small. And then the fresh water is even smaller than that. And then the fresh water that's in our lakes and rivers is even smaller. So really, we have a very small amount of water, fresh water, that we have within our cycle. So it's also really important that we use our water as a very a beneficial purpose, effective and efficient. That's where we get into conservation. We should treat this water as a precious gift, and because we have that gift, using rainwater harvesting to be able to capture and utilize that. And that's exactly what rainwater harvesting is. It's capturing that precipitation and using it as close as possible to where it falls. And I like that, so it's our local water supply. First of all, I got to state that we're in Arizona, and in Arizona, it is legal to harvest your rainwater that falls on your property. So if you hear that it's illegal, that maybe in other states, but not in Arizona, you can harvest the precipitation that falls onto your site. Now, the groundwater, that's a totally other thing, but the rainwater you can harvest. Wow. Okay. Rain, it can be a problem, and that is how it's looked at, because when it rains, especially lately with our monsoon storms, they're coming hard and fast, and we're getting a lot more rain in a short amount of time. When I moved here in 1991, around 3 or 4 o'clock, here comes the storm clouds in the summertime, drop 20 degrees, we get some nice rain. But now it seems to be accumulating more and pushing back further into the summer months. And so when we get all that hard, fast water, we consider it a problem. There's a stormwater system that is to take that water and, well, it take it away. And so basically it's gone. However, it will go to some riparian areas. It could make it back to our rivers. And that's why it's so important that we make sure it's just the rain that goes down the drain. Because in these outfall areas, if we have a lot of pollution that's accumulating and going into the stormwater system, and then it goes out into the riparian areas and so forth, now we have to handle that at the end point. So that's exactly what we can do. The problem starts at home. I mean, so we can think about, where does our water go now? Does the water just flow off of our site? Does it go to where there's no beneficial purpose at all? For example, does the water just run down all the hardscape away from all the plants? This is something that you're going to want to observe. What is your current landscape doing now? And then we can be part of the solution. And I like that because we can make changes. And if we can make those changes just by harvesting our rainwater and everything that comes with it, which we'll learn through this lunch and learn, then that's important. And it's good to be part of the solution. Okay, so reasons to harvest rain. These are just three, but capturing that stormwater definitely creates that on-site oasis. We can give our plants that extra water that we can capture from the roof, bring it down into and nourish our plants. We're planting the water for the plants. To take advantage of that salt-free water, it's got a little bit of nitrogen charge to it. And, you know, gosh, the other morning, looked at the rain gauge. We had almost 3/4 of an inch of rain at our house. And I'm looking at all the plants and the sun's coming up and they're a little bit more green and looking happy. But we can reduce that potable water usage. And that's a key because in water conservation, if we can maximize the benefit of our rainwater when it does rain, then we can reduce that potable water usage. So for rainwater harvesting, especially for just the basics, it's always a good start is looking at Brad Lancaster. He's known as the rainwater harvesting guru down in Tucson, and he wrote a couple books. He's got a really nice website, just a pack full of resource. And this is the first book I would start. So if this is your first journey on rainwater harvesting, I would highly encourage to pick up this book. Check it out from the library. But what I really like about Brad Lancaster, he broke down 8 simple principles for us to follow. Brad also comes from a permaculture background, and permaculture is also based around principles. And I like that because it gives us something to follow. So we're going to go through this lunch and learn. We're going to go through the 8 different principles one by one, but we're also going to do a little bit of assessment. So first thing that I want to do, start with the first principle. Begin with long, thoughtful observation. That's what I love about this photo. When I was out hiking and saw this, I'm just amazed about all the little patterns. I just keep looking and looking and seeing the different patterns. And that's what long and thoughtful observation is all about. It's just observing those patterns. And so think about that. If you're just new to your property and you really don't have a good lay of the land and where everything, your different patterns, start there. That's your best bet. Now, say you've been on your property for a while and you've had some observations. Good time to start with a site drawing. And now this is just to get your thoughts out. So different sectors, also known as factors. Here are a few that we're going to look at, especially if you draw on to where you can add those layers on top of the drawing, make them individual. But this is a really good time to get all your observations out before you put that shovel in the ground. We're going to take a look at utilities, sun, and water. And you're going to start with creating that base map. We have some tools available to us. There's the Maricopa County's Assessor Map. Through the Maricopa County's Assessor Map, you can pull up your address if you live in Maricopa County, and you can zoom in to pretty close. So there's going to be a scale that you can also follow. That gives you one. You could also use Google Other Map, but you're going to be looking at an aerial view. And I want you to look at that and start with your property lines. Where's the house, the permanent structures, the existing trees and shrubs? You're going to note all that down. More importantly, the direction. Because if you're all observing right now, you'll notice north is not at the top. North is down here. That's important. All drawings, I mean, basically where we look at our Google Maps and our assessor's map, north is usually on top. But I want you to think about that. North doesn't always have to be on top. You just have to know where it's at, because it's very important to know where your directions are. So you're going to start with your base, and we're going to go with utilities. And the reason why I start with utilities is this is that wild energy that flows through your yards. Well, really, it's not necessarily wild, but they can really deter a project, meaning where are those utilities? Where are they running through your property? Arizona 811 is a free resource. And it's by the law that before you dig, you will call 811 or go online and do a ticket. They're going to reach out to all the different utilities that are in your area, and those utilities are going to come out and mark where the utilities are located. Now, electric, it's either going to be below ground or above ground. If it's above ground, we still need to look up. Yes, I may not hit it with my shovel when digging, but if I'm planting a plant, is it going to interfere with the above utilities? Same with your communication lines. The gas line, that's going to be buried. And the connection points of these services are right at the house. So the electric meter, the gas meter, the communication box, that's right attached to our house somewhere. And those lines will be marked up to our house if they're underground. The water line and the sewer line, however, they're not, the connection points are not necessarily right at the house. So your water line, so your incoming potable water supply line, it's the water meter. The water meter is going to be by the street, sidewalk, typically. And so from the water meter to the house is a private utility, meaning you need to know where that's at. It's not going to get marked for you through 811. And same with the sewer line. Sewer line's that big line either in the alley or in the street, wherever the manhole is to access that. That's what they're going to paint. They're not going to paint all the way where the sewer is coming up to your home. The reason why I bring this up is you need to know where your water line and your sewer line is. I'm not too concerned about hitting the sewer line when I'm digging, because that's usually going to be three, maybe, 4 or 5. It's going to be deep. The water line, it should be 18 to 24 inches deep, but it could be shallower. I don't want you to plant your favorite tree right on top of a utility line. So we need to do our part. Call 811 or go online, fill out your ticket. And then once those lines are marked, go ahead and draw them in. Draw them on your drawing. So that way they're there so you can reference. However, every time you dig, you're to call 811. Now, I marked irrigation as a question, right? Because irrigation, meaning drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation, those lines are running somewhere underground, and we should know where they're at before digging, unless we're going to just be replacing all of that. That does not get marked by 811. Those are all private water lines. So know where they're at, mark them on your drawing. So then we're going to get into sun. And so for, whew, boy, it gets hot. I just came from outside, feeling a little steamy out there today. But it's knowing where the sun is. Where does the sun rise in the morning? Where does it set? These are all important because it's going to show us where our shadows are. Where are our sun angles? Where's our hot spots and cold spots? And we're going to mark those on our drawing. Well, let's take a look. I love this illustration because this is a clock with a face on it, so with the numbers. Imagine that you're now putting that clock on top of a house, as an example, is shown here in the illustration. It's about the shadows. And so during our summer solstice, so on that June 21st, when we're celebrating our summer solstice, the sun's going to rise roughly about where the number 2 on the clock is positioned. So it's going to rise in the northeast. And then it's going to set in the northwest, okay, represented by the number 10. And it's going to be very high in the southern sky, about 78 degrees. Okay, so that's our summer solstice. When we look at our winter solstice, the sun comes up in the southeast and it sets in the southwest, represented by the number 4 and the number 8 on the clock. So kind of keep that in mind, right? Because usually when I ask this question, where does the sun rise and where does it set throughout the year? I typically will get east and west. And that is true. I truly hope that the sun will rise 365 days out of the year, but it's not always east and west. And we need to be observing that. Why? Because it helps with our shadow patterns. It's where this illustration, this is going to help demonstrate, especially on that south side of the home. So when we're thinking on the south side of our home, so for that passive cooling, where's the shadow going to be casted? At what time of the day? At what time of the year? So we can see by the illustration, this is a tree. This happens to be a desert willow tree, lilac chase tree. These are the trees that are in the SRP Trees Matter Shade Tree Program. But it's the height. Look, 25-foot tall tree planted about 15 feet away from the house. In the summertime, look at that shadow. It's not quite touching the home. Okay. But in the wintertime, look at that shadow. The shadow is going to be on that south part of the roof at noon. So why do I bring this up? It's because of solar panels. If we have solar panels on the south side of our roof, we should be aware of that. So where we're not putting too much shade at a certain time of year to where we're reducing our solar energy. Because when we go into larger trees, so like the mesquite, the palo verdes, these are going to be those 30-foot tall and wide trees. Again, planted about 15 feet away from the house. Now we're getting that sun or shade in the summertime. Still got a lot of shade in the wintertime on that south side. And then same with the willow acacia. Now this is the tallest tree that, within our pines and different, with the acacias, the shoestring, the willow acacias, these are, going to be about that 40-foot tall tree. So for our passive cooling, we're doing all right in the summer. It's not necessarily shading the house, but it is shading the landscape. But again, my concern is that winter on the south side. So my message here is if you're planting for passive cooling on the south side of your home, think about that winter sun and its passive heating, if you will, because I want that winter sun to warm my home. So I'd want trees that would drop their leaves in the winter time. So if I'm planting on the south side of my home, thinking about leaves that drop their leaves. If I'm planting on the west side and then the east and north, especially on this north side of the house, those could be trees that drop their leaves or not. They could be deciduous trees or non-deciduous, especially as we come down on the side here of the house. Now for shadows and sun angles, this is where we're really thinking about that passive cooling. What can we do to help cool our home without using different types of structures, just using living plants to help cool our home? Now that works really well if we have enough space on the west side of our house, because we can see here on the west side, that's the warmest side. So this is what we call our solar compass. I've placed this down on the object, and the object being the house that's casting the shadow. So with that shadow being casted, I see here that in the northeast, that's going to be more the cooler side of the home, where the west side, kind of that southwest, that's going to be our hotter side of the home. So this is where we really should be thinking about planting our plants, for that passive cooling on our west side. So trees, shrubs, things that will right tree, right place, because if we have a neighbor right here, a big tree may not be appropriate. Or if we really have those narrow, tiny spaces, trees are not going to be appropriate because of their crown, their canopy size. We want to make sure that we're not causing a lot of extra maintenance work. So if you have that tight area, now this is where you could think of larger shrubs, vines, using trellises, creating archways, breezeways with vines. Those are all good things to consider when we don't have enough space to plant trees. So I want you to look in those plant resources and figure out, okay, this full-size tree is going to be 30 feet, and I only have 15 feet between me and my neighbor. That 30-foot tree is too big. You need to look to see what's going to fit, and then also go out and talk with your neighbor. Because when you plant something on your west side or your east side or south or north, it still might be casting a shadow onto your neighbor. It might be growing into the neighbor's side, so part of the canopy on the neighbor's side. So have a discussion with them. Let them know what you're doing. You might be help educating them a little bit on passive cooling and why you're doing this. And then also, if you're looking for trees, check out the SRP Shade Tree Program. Uh, all right, so let's get into principle number 2. So rainwater harvesting principle number 2 is start at the top. This is good. We always want to start at the top so we can work with gravity. So water is going to run, downhill. It uses gravity for flow. And understanding what a watershed is important. So a watershed is an area of land or an area that's draining to a common point.
Herbaceous.
So it's an area that's draining to a common point. As we can see in the illustration, we have we got bodies of water, we got some streams and rivers, and it's flowing through to a common point where the divide, that's shedding down to another common point. Okay, so we have watersheds. Well, you have these at your home too. So start thinking about that long, thoughtful observation and where is my water flowing? Okay, and we're going to start at the top. And the top at our residential homes, for example, is going to be our roof. So we're going to draw where the water is flowing. So we're going to start from the top. We're going to draw arrows representing which direction it's flowing. Mark the high points. So that's going to help you know, okay, from the high point going north, water flows this direction. High point going south, water flows to the south. Okay. So you're going to mark your high points. It's also good to know what your annual rainfall is. And here, we're typically around 6 inches of rain. Last year, it was really rough. We didn't get much rain, but in September and October, we got over 6 inches of rain, basically our whole annual rainfall in 2 months. So when thinking about that, we should be sizing our systems a little bit larger to maximize capturing those larger storms. And there's your rule of thumb. So once you determine what your square foot area is, okay, so I'm going to mark this out, and I can use those assessor map tools, and I can figure out what my square footage area is, and then I can times that by 0.623. Okay, so let's say I have that 1,000 square foot area. I times it by 0.623. That's 623 gallons that I can capture from that 1,000 square foot area in a 1 inch rain. Okay. So 0.623, that's the number to remember. It's one of our area codes. Just put a point in front of it. You could take any square foot area that you come up with, times it by 0.623, and that's going to give you how many gallons of water from a 1 inch rain event. So it's doing all that conversion. Now, you're not going to get 100% of that water. There's going to be some coefficients, like the roof's going to absorb a little bit before it. There might be, gutters, things like that. May not be going exactly where you're expecting it to go. So you're going to add another coefficient. So take that number and times it by, say, a 0.9 as an example. But that gives you an idea of how much water in a 1 inch event. If you're wondering what 3/4 of an inch, then you just times it by 0.75. Or what was that quarter event? Times it by 0.25. What's your annual? Times it by 6. So start with that. That's a good starting point. Principle number 3, start small and simple. Wow, I remember first water harvesting projects. Actually, I remember my first water level, which we'll see here a little bit later. I had to over-engineer it, of course. So starting small and simple, I'm always trying to echo back in my mind, like, okay, let's not over-engineer it. Let's just start small. Let's start simple. Let's think about what we want to add. And so, we talked a little bit about passive cooling, and water conservation is definitely should be in the back of our mind, always using our water the most efficient and effective. Low maintenance, areas where we can go out and enjoy and have a retreat. Do we want to eat from our plants? So all these different things we can think about within our rainwater harvesting project by starting small and simple. Number 4, we get into the spread and infiltrate the flow of water. So this is where the fun starts. Okay, so we've gone through our long, thoughtful observations. We've noted down, where's our pathways, where's our prevailing wind, where's all these factors, also known as sectors, flowing through our property. And now we're ready to start thinking about how to slow that water down and get it to sink in the soil by using earthworks. That's one, just pausing on this photo for a minute. This one photo actually shows a lot of these features in place. Starting at the top, it would be the roof. It's up here with a gutter downspout. The water comes out starting here in this basin. And a basin, which I'll talk in a moment, it's a low area. It's going to capture that water. It's where it settles and rests and sinks. And then it overflows into another basin. That basin would overflow, and this is now going to convey water. When we convey water, that's a swell. And then we have a berm here that's created that basin. So we have a basin, berm and basin, and a swell. All right there, one photo. And these are our strategies. Berm and basin, swells, infiltration basins, French drains, check dams, organic mulch, permeable hardscape plants. This all goes into those earthwork strategies. Notice I mentioned plants. Plants are a big key of the earthwork strategy. So is that organic mulch. Think of these systems as working in harmony. They're all connected together. And so that's what we really would want to happen is we want to mimic nature as much as we can. And so that way the landscape can do its own work. And then we're just coming in for some low maintenance. Okay, here we go. So our berms and basins. As I mentioned, berms, that's that raised area that creates a basin behind it. And the basin's where the water's going to accumulate. It's going to rest there and sink into the soil. So creating a berm and a basin. Now, if we're not able to dig the soil to create that, to get the soil to create the berm, which creates the basin behind it, we can also bring in some fill soil to build up. And we're always going to compact our berms. So I want to tamp the berms, but I do not want to compact the basins. Okay? But I want to make sure that the berm's going to be able to hold when that water comes in. So that's important. Knowing our slopes are very important. So on our horizontal run to vertical rise, okay, so here's our run, 1-to-1. We've got a 2-to-1 and a 3-to-1. It's all about how gentle or steep those slopes are. A 3-to-1, this typically wouldn't need any rock armoring, anything to help stabilize that slope. But when we get a 2-to-1, this is where we want to start adding some rock to help stabilize the slope. And definitely a 1-to-1, we're going to have to help stabilize that for sure. This is maybe a better point to start thinking of terraces. So as a swell, and I mentioned the swell is for conveying water. Okay, so we had our berm and basins. Now we got our swells for conveying water. In terminology, this gets a little tricky because in some documentation, you'll read a swell. A swell reads as a basin. And that's what I really like about Brad Lancaster in his book is he made that separation. So whenever he talks about swell, it's conveying water, not not a not a speedway from one point to the other, a slow little passive way, getting that water from one feature to the other. Remember, we just want that water to slow down as we're moving it, chance to spread out and sink. And a swell is used for conveying. And this was a really fun project, thanks to the city of Glendale, where the water's coming off, and during the storm, the scupper we don't see, but the water's flowing through. But look at that water. It's just conveying, going through the system. And I love it when rainwater harvesting is a solution to a problem. Because before, that water used to just come up here on the sidewalk and follow the sidewalk, and because the rest of the landscape was built higher. So there's a little term for you is turn that mound upside down. So if we turn the mound upside down, we are going to create basins. And this is exactly what my wife and I, Erica, did years ago. We did this through a workshop with Watershed Management Group, a co-op workshop where these were all mounds, big old mounds. And then we deflated them and we turned them upside down to capture water. And so this is a photo from back in 2014. Now we can't even see the basins. The tuberosa is all grown in and the wolfberry and all the other plants. And that's really about basins is once they're in and the plants grow in, typically we're not seeing them. But they're just the silent workers. So infiltration basin, those are our low areas where the water is going to settle, rest, and have a time to soak into the soil. This is also a good look at permeable solution. So with the flagstone, and the next slide, I'm going to be talking about French drains. So French drain was actually my first water harvesting project. And we installed those French drains underneath the flagstone to help direct the water away from the house out towards the drip line of the tree. And that's what we see here in a French drain. So the French drain, it's another way of calling it is the rock burrito. So we're going to dig a trench. We're going to dig a trench about a foot deep, about a foot wide or so. And then I'm going to use a landscape fabric. I'm going to put that in to the trench. And now I'm going to use a crushed gravel. I'm not going to use decomposed granite. I'm going to use a larger crushed gravel that's not decomposing over time. That's going to cause my French drain to just basically fill with more sediment and not want to drain. So by using a crushed gravel, now I fill that into the landscape fabric. Then I'm going to fold that fabric over. And then I could put flagstone on it. I could do other things. And so the French drain is a good way. If you don't have that surface area for an above ground basin, you can put the water just below the ground and let it soak in through a French drain. So permeable hardscape, so there I mentioned there's our flagstone. So permeable hardscape is actually about the cracks in between the material. And so if the water can flow through between the pavers, between this urbanite, so this is cut concrete that was replaced back in so that it works as a permeable solution. And then plants. We got to plant the pump. And so when we create these features, so we've created our Berman basins, our swells, our basins, French drains. We're planting the water, but we're planting the water for plants. Because if we're just putting the water out into a basin that doesn't have many trees or shrubs, ground covers, no roots to to soak that moisture up, what we might end up is creating a problem, and we don't want that. Because in all these features, we want that water to drain in less than 36 hours. So we want to make sure, as I mentioned, we're compacting our berms, but we are not compacting our basins. And then we're planting roots so that way it helps break up that soil. It helps with our soil life, which is also going to make our soil a little bit more permeable. You always have to plan for an overflow. Because if you do not plan for an overflow, I guarantee you Mother Nature has a definite plan for that overflow. And you want to make sure that you're both on tune with where that should be. And this is just a really good example of a green stormwater infrastructure installation. Meaning we're going to capture the water that flows off of the street. So the water's coming down, it's flowing this direction, and then there's this curb cut that allows the water to come into the landscape area. That's the only opening. So this being the only opening, it's also our overflow. And I like that because when the water comes in, fills up our feature, and I love using this organic wood chip mulch, I don't want that to all to float away. So water comes in. When this feature gets full, no more water can come in. So then water just goes down to the next, hopefully, the next green stormwater infrastructure feature. If not, to the storm drain. You always have to plan for that overflow. So I briefly mentioned the bunyip. So yes, this is when I got started. My wife Erica came home from a water conservation class in 2005, all jazzed up about this green book. Going to do some rainwater harvesting. We're going to create a bunyip, install a French drain. I'm like, what is all this? I was back in that time. I was in IT, QA type of person. So using my farmer ingenuity, I'm like, well, I got to over-engineer this bunyip. But you do not have to do that. This is simply a tube that's about 5/8 in diameter. It's a clear tube and about 30 foot in length. I'm going to use 2 sticks. And the sticks actually don't matter if the height's different. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the bottom and I'm going to take my tape measure. I'm going to go up to 36 inches. And I'm going to mark my first line on the stick. And that's going to be my 1. Okay, or 0. And I'm going to do the same on the other stick. And that's why it doesn't matter if our sticks are different heights. Okay, then I'm going to attach that tube to the sticks. Then I'm going to fill it full of water. Now, when I fill it full of water, I want to make sure I get all the air bubbles out, no kinks in the hose, because that's going to affect the water level. Now, I want you to be thinking about a lake. Perfectly smooth as glass. That water is at the same level all the way around the lake bed. Okay. Well, same in your bunyip. When I'm bringing them together, and that's how we calibrate it, I bring it together and yep, we're at the same line. There's no kinks or no bubbles in my hose. And then I go out to measure. So one person's going to hold one end, the other person's going to hold the other end, and we're going to read the difference between the markings. Okay, so here by the home, we read a 14. Here up on top of the mound, we read a 16. So the difference is 2 inches. Now we could leapfrog, we can keep moving around. We just got to keep track of our positives and our negatives. So that way we can run a tally at the end. But knowing where the water flows and have a planned overflow. So in that ideal scenario, you'll have a minimum of 4 inches of what you don't want to flood out before the overflow. Then you have you're going to have the berm and an overflow, another drop of say 4 inches. Okay. So you want to make sure your elevations are all key. So that way, when the storms come and they fill up, and they can fill up, you're not causing flooding in an area that you did not intend. So know your levels, know where your overflow is. Maximize that living and organic ground cover. As I mentioned, this is the pump, right? So definitely the plants as your living ground cover, but also your wood chip material, organic. Rock, so our crushed gravel or decomposed granite, they all provide benefits of holding moisture in the soil. However, a wood chip mulch, a shredded and chipped wood, stems and leaves and all that, even if it's slightly composted, notice all the different sizes, all the different pieces. And that's important because when I'm talking wood chip mulch, I am not talking bark, especially pine bark. Bark is very light, it will float, and it's waxy. So I'm looking at all the other the wood that's been chipped and shredded, the stems and leaves. I'm looking for a really good texture because that will kind of lock in place and it won't want to float away on you. And then leaving our debris, I like that. This is another pun from Brad Lancaster, is if we could just leave our leaves be. That's important. Just let them drop. We don't have to go rake them up. We don't have to blow them out. We can just let that beautiful desert willow drop its leaves, and that's what we're seeing. There's last year's leaves decomposing there onto the wood chip mulch, and here's our new growth. So if we can leave the waste, the debris from our plants, if we could just leave it be, let it self-mulch it. Now, if we have rock mulch underneath it, we could still leave that litter on top. Or we could go ahead and if we're using a wood chip mulch, we don't have to do anything with it. It just blends within the material. All right. Principle number 7, maximize those beneficial relationships and efficiency. It's also getting back to permaculture and when thinking about this principle, how to maximize those beneficial relationships. Everything that I'm thinking about putting into a design or implementing, it should serve more than one function. It should serve at least 2 functions, if not more. If it only serves one function, it's got to be pretty important to worth its spot in the landscape. But we can think about all the other functions that it's doing. So, for example, if we can do water harvesting and we're planting trees that provide food that's also providing dust control, things like that, attracting our pollinators by our different plants that we're planting. So these are all things that we can do to maximize the beneficial relationships, which is going to create that efficiency in the system. And I love this photo. This is one that you wouldn't necessarily see unless it's raining. And this was actually kind of between projects here where this has been redone and now there's wood chip mulch all over the landscape. But before they did the putting in the extra trees and the wood chip mulch, they made this concrete pathway, part of the design. Notice that the pathway is working as a berm that created the basin behind it. Notice this tree. When that canopy grows, that water's right at the drip line for this tree. Perfect. That's exactly what those relationships are. Now, that might not have been intended. That was just one of those wonderful things that just happen. But those are the things that you'll see through your long and thoughtful observation, and then consider them within your design on how can we maximize these relationships. And definitely, a tree is the easiest one to think about. A gift from just one tree and shade, absolutely. I work outside in the mornings. I'm usually back in the office by 11 or so, but this is the time that we're always looking for that shade tree to do our recapping on our report, going through the consultation information. And when there's no tree to stand under and it's just hot, whew, boy, those are, think about that shade. Creating screens, we don't have to build walls. We can think of the trees, the shrubs, the ground covers, creating that privacy screen. It's going to help clean our air. As it blows through, adds extra little humidity, but it provides us oxygen. I mean, that alone, just thinking of trees, of why we should plant trees. Another little tidbit about trees is when it's great that we're planting new trees. We need to plant more trees. We also need to really care for our older trees. So as Dr. Ursula Shook shared once at a Shade conference, she said that trees sequester more carbon than they put out after they're 20 years old. So up until they're about 20 years old or so, they're actually putting out more carbon than they're sequestering. Okay. So 20 years or older, now they're providing more benefit to the environment. So definitely, let's plant more trees. But let's be thinking about how we're maintaining and caring for our existing trees. That's really, really important. Now we gotta have the reassess. We gotta get back the feedback loop. So we've done all our long, thoughtful observation. We started at the top. We started simple. We did the earthworks. We're thinking about how we're maximizing those functions. We're integrating the plants. We're doing all our things. But if we did not get out after the storm, how do we know it's working? This is one of the most important principles is we got to get out there and observe. And it's not, if you see something not working, that's all right. You know, that's the part of it. We need to know what's working or what's not working. Because if it's not working, these are things we need to fix. We have to be able to go out and say, well, why is this not draining? So we do our percolation tests. That's something we should did at the very beginning. So when we're talking about our basin depths depend on what our percolation rate is. And that's just kind of a quick way of doing that. You dig a hole a foot wide, a foot deep. You're going to fill it full of water. You're going to fill it full of water. You're going to get it completely saturated. The next day, you're going to come out, you're going to fill it full of water, and you're going to time to see how long it sinks. And so if it sinks an inch an hour, and we're creating a 6-inch basin, we know it's going to drain within about 6 hours. Okay. But if it's going to drain and it's not showing it's draining in 72 hours, we're going to have to make our basins wider, shallow, but wider. We're also going to think about how to break up and improve the drainage of that soil. But think of those features. If we can't capture and hold as much water that will either soak in within 36 hours, we're going to have to be thinking about wider, not as deep. Get out there and do the reassess loop. Definitely some cautions with this, because with rainwater harvesting, we don't want to, and this is the International Building Code, so we don't want to sink water within 10 feet of our foundation. And that means that's where the deepest part of my basin. I don't want the deepest part of my basin to just be a few feet away from my foundation. If it's at 10 feet and out, there we go. That's good. So then I'm thinking, well, okay, I only got 6 feet between the house and my property line, but that roof is shedding water and I can't utilize it in this space. All right, let's look back at our strategies. What did I say that could convey water? A swell can convey water. So I can create a shallow swell to convey that water from the side of my house to the front or to the back or to both. If it's one of those scenarios where it's just not safe to drain within that space, this is where I'd start thinking of gutters. If water passively flows off of the roof and goes into my landscape earthwork features without me having to add gutters, that's the best scenario. But if I have to direct water away from an area I can't collect it, a swell doesn't make sense to convey the water. If I have the driveway, so that might be an area I'd put a gutter so that way I can capture the roof water that's just going to the driveway and down to the street. So thinking about those, but definitely we've got to be smart about where we're infiltrating that water. Call 811, go online. As I mentioned, it's the law. It's so important and it's the safe thing to do. And then definitely follow all the principles. We covered them pretty quickly. And I'd highly recommend looking at Brad Lancaster's website. His book is amazing. The second book gets all into building these features. And so the first one's an overall going through the principles of why. And then the second volume is okay, let's get our hands dirty and start making these features. And I mentioned 36 hours. That is crucial. And the reason why I should mention, we're going to get mosquitoes. So vector control. If we have water that's standing longer, especially 72 hours, that's going to be a problem. So we want to make sure that our solutions to the problem are not causing problems. So as a summary, don't be a drain. Use your principles. The long, thoughtful observation. I hope I mentioned a few things in this presentation that's encouraged you to now get out and go outside and start looking, where does the water flow when it rains? And I hope you don't have to wait longer. I hope it's tonight and we get some more monsoon event. But that is the best time to go out and watch where the rain patterns are, is while it's raining or shortly after. Start observing where water's settling, where's those low spots, so those are key things to observe after a storm. And then get to work. Go out, start implementing these, start small and simple, and be part of the solution. All right. So that was all the rainwater harvesting presentation as a representative of the City of Tempe for water conservation. For all of the Tempe residents out there, this is the closest that we get to a rainwater rebate, and it's our grass removal and conversion rebate. So it's up to 50 cents a square foot for removing grass and replacing with, yes, plants. I like to say it's replacing with shade because we're going to require a 30% area of plant coverage of full size. So when you plant that little tree today, that little 5-gallon sapling of a desert willow, it's going to be 25 feet in diameter. And that's the size that we'll be taking in consideration for that plant coverage. And then we offer a rebate. It's up to $75 a year to plant the shadows. So if you're in Tempe and you're thinking about a grass removal and conversion rebate, definitely tempe.gov/rebates. But thinking about now all these strategies I mentioned on how to shape that earth. Lots of resources. Again, these are all on tempe.gov/conservation. But what municipality that you live in, if you're part of the AMWA cities, you can reach out. The new plant guide, this was updated in 2024. The Xeriscape guide, this is actually being printed. So this will be a new one coming out. There's a new landscape watering by the numbers guide. So a lot of updates happening. All right. Well, I want to open up for any questions that might have come through.
Are you able to see the questions on there, Ryan, from the chat, or would you?
Oh, let's see. I think I can get to that.
No worries. The
Let's
first
see.
question. The first question is there a list of landscapers who can do this or maintain this? My landscaper
Ah,
insists on raking all the leaves.
No, that's a really good question. And as a representative of the city, I'm not able to recommend any specific contractors. However, contractors here in the valley, so another organization called smartscape.org, they have a Know Your Pro page. You can search through the those that are for hire, and rainwater harvesting, I believe, is one of those. If it's not, you need to check, but you could search through different criteria. And then it's interviewing contractors. Take the information that you learned today, any other information about rainwater harvesting, and see where they're at with that. And if it's a good match, move forward. Definitely. Oh,
Um,
another one is ALCA, Arizona Landscape Contractors Association. And that's another organization meant for contractors, definitely getting into more irrigation side of it, but there might be some rainwater harvester contractors there too.
the next question was, how can homeowners effectively harvest rainwater despite infrequent rainfall?
Ah, yes. So how can we harvest the rainwater despite how infrequent that it? You start small and you start simple. And I know that we covered this information, but that's really truly it. My first project for rainwater harvesting was taking buckets underneath the eave, and so when it rained, I could capture that rain into a bucket, and we had a lot of buckets. Then I was like, well, now I'm gonna need that water maybe a week or so after the rain. So then I started putting it into a barrel, pumping it out of the barrel. Then I installed a rain tank. And when we're thinking about our tanks and tank sizing, well, with our water patterns becoming more, we're getting more in a short amount of time, that's when I would consider sizing my rain tank up to about 3 inches of accumulative catchment. So I know it doesn't rain much here, but if we capture what we can, that will benefit our plants.
And for anybody who wants those links, we are posting those in the chat. Someone was asking about the rebates, if those also applying to Phoenix residents, or is there different criteria?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, because I'm a City of Tempe water conservation specialist, these are, particular to Tempe, but reach out to your municipality, wherever you're at, and just ask them, what rebates do you offer? And, well, or do you see offering a rebate, or what kind of advice that they would offer? Yeah.
Then there's another question. Is there a minimum size of basin, and where in the basin should plants be planted? On the slope
Oh,
or in the lowest part?
that's a great question. Okay. So the minimum, it's usually 8 inches as far as our basin depths. That's kind of our go-to 8-inch basin depth. We're going to have an overflow as well. But it all depends on your percolation rate. If you can't soak enough water in that within that time frame, you have to go shallower. You're not going to want to go more than 18 inches. Once you go 18 inches deep, we're starting to get into some maybe hazards, stepping into protecting things like that, or creating too deep of a basin, thinking of our sides. But usually typical basins around 8 inches in depth. Where we plant our plants on the shelves. So think about things that love to be inundated with water. They can take that. So I put bunch grasses down in the bottom of the basins. But if I'm going to plant a ironwood or palo verde, they got to be up on the top shelf. And your cacti succulents. So there again, Brad Lancaster, check out his website. He's got a whole illustration that shows that those terraces basically where you plant your plants.
Great. I don't see any other questions. But if anybody does have any other questions, go ahead and type them down there. Thank you, Ryan, so much. Always so lovely to learn from you. For
Very
our
welcome.
next, yeah, for our next Lunch and Learn in August, we have guest speaker Juliet Stromberg, who is an ecologist, botanist, writer, and a researcher in the Sonoran Desert ecoregion. And the topic is going to be woody and herbaceous plants for Phoenix yards and the animal life they support, which I feel like was really great with this topic we had today. So, how perfect. I'll put the link in the chat where you can sign up.
All right.
Yeah,
Yep. Thank you,
thanks
everyone. Thanks for your
everybody.
time today. Appreciate you.
Yep. You're welcome to hop off. Any questions, let us know, but thank you so much.